my name is Ben Lambert. You guys can reach me on Twitter at @SoWhelmed, and I'll be speaking today with Brandon Middleton. You can reach him on Twitter at BRMiddle. And Brandon, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to just have you introduce yourself. I think you'll do a better job than I will.
Sure thing, sure thing. Thanks, Ben. So again, my name is Brandon Middleton. I'm based out of the San Francisco Bay Area. I work at Microsoft, and my job is to talk to our customers about cloud and security primarily. So I go up and down the Bay Area and get to chat about Azure, get to chat about a lot of the different services and technologies that Microsoft is investing in and our customers are moving towards. So that's the 1,000-level view of what I get to do day in and day out.
Nice. So when you say you get to talk to customers all day about this stuff like security, is that helping them migrate to the cloud and understanding the security concerns around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, here in San Francisco, it's interesting because the companies that we have are ranging from really, really well-established and older to startups that are born in the cloud, so they're doing, all of their primary workloads from the start. They're putting it in the cloud, and everybody in between. So I get to talk to, banks, get to talk to law firms, get to talk to software companies, and each time the conversation is catered a little bit differently. So, yeah, it's a lot of how do I get to the cloud if I'm a traditional on-prem shop, and then if they're already hybrid mode or in the cloud, how do I make things secure? And even if they're on-prem, I can still talk on-prem security with them as well. So, yeah, that's the gamut of what I get to speak about.
That's cool. That sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. So, obviously, Microsoft, Azure, and AWS are kind of in the top two spots right now. And Azure is just growing so quickly. What do you see, like when you talk to customers, what's the benefit for them for Azure over something like AWS or Google Cloud?
Sure. So I like to start this kind of conversation just with a little bit of a history lesson, right? So we've been selling, Microsoft, Office software for almost 40 years now, and the relationships that we have from a sales perspective are at the very top of the food chain, which is Fortune, 50 companies all the way down to, startups now who are working on that platform. So the history and the maturity of the sales team and some of the platforms and comfort with Microsoft are some things that really help gain and garner trust. When you position us against Amazon, I think, they started in 2006, and infrastructure as a service, the economics of, spinning up a desktop or a virtual machine and getting storage from somewhere in the cloud made it really, really straightforward and easy for lots of customers. But when we started to, see the opportunity, and Microsoft got into it 2009, 2010, Amazon I see as kind of the consumer market moving upwards into commercial and into, big enterprise. And then Microsoft I see as starting in enterprise, since we've been selling software there for such a long time, and moving more downstream. So I think the bigger differentiators in the beginning were, platform as a service. So anybody can do IaaS. You can do that on Azure just as well as you can do that in AWS. But when you talk about packaging, the Microsoft server OS, in addition to the Linux stuff that a lot of people are doing, I think that it's a lot easier to build applications and to do integrations with larger ERP systems that traditional enterprises run on top of something that's as flexible as Azure. So, AWS has been doing a good job on adding capability. Google, I think, is still considerable ways behind us. I think Diane Green has got a big job to build out a sales team and become more enterprise as well. But that's the longer answer to that question. But hopefully the listeners got some insight out of some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Let's see. So So you kind of mentioned basically you can do infrastructure as a service pretty much anywhere. Does that mean you kind of view the platform as a service offerings, the ability to easily bundle up your code and get it running in production as one of the main benefits of Azure right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the global scale and footprint, um, I think is something that each of us have. I do believe we have more regions um, than AWS and Google in terms of sheer compute, in terms of how many servers are actually out there. They may have the edge there, but worldwide presence is a big deal for multinationals.
Yep.
So they need to make sure that as they're building out an application, it can be supported, and you've got CDNs that are all over the world so that you can get your content to the people that need to get it. Um, the platform as a service, yes, I think is probably one of the bigger differentiators, and the amount of investment. I mean, literally, we're building this year one data center per week, which
Wow.
is um, it's pretty substantial when you look at some of the competition and some of the even smaller players. I wonder out loud a lot of times whether anybody except us big three are going to be able to stay in this game, because it's so much money is going into the infrastructure and kind of building up more capability. And
Yep.
yeah, that's kind of how I see it. But yeah, platform as a service, uptime, cost, to some degree. I think we're seeing a little bit of a kind of flatlining across the different compute categories, across the storage categories, and we have, I'd say, some advantage when it comes to machine learning as well, and some of the big data stuff. Um, we've got some history in that. We've acquired some companies. Security would be another thing where I um, think that Amazon has some work to do. And then our identity story is, Active Directory, being able to do single sign-on and leverage a common, Microsoft identity
Yep.
to, unlock services across your own business, or if you do B2B and partner stuff with other vendors. I feel like the Azure platform is a lot simpler to deal with than either AWS or Google.
Nice. So with the Active Directory integration, do you find like some of the customers that maybe are already a Microsoft shop are finding it easier to migrate because they already have these things in place, and it just basically is the natural extension of technology is to move into the cloud?
Absolutely. So a few years back, I talked about Active Directory. That was the local, on-premise way to
Mhm.
store users and groups and do, distribution groups inside of a company, and, hold email lists and that kind of thing. So with Azure Active Directory, we kind of put that concept of a user store into the cloud and built all these, pre-integrations with SaaS apps that people are comfortable with. So if you're a Salesforce.com user or Concur or Workday, lots and lots of different applications that we pre-integrated for single sign-on, for even at the API level, we can go back and forth and query information. And the fact that, an Amazon or a Google would have to literally start from scratch, and that they're 20 years or so behind us from an identity perspective, when you look at a customer and they've got to make a decision on whether to keep doing what they've been doing for a little while and go hybrid with Microsoft, or try to make that same functionality work by daisy chaining a few technologies from a different few vendors together, that's a big feather in our cap at Microsoft, I would say. So yeah,
Nice.
that's a big deal.
That's awesome. Um, So, a couple of questions coming in from the folks watching. I know the answer to this. I want to let you answer because I think you'll have a much more articulate answer than I. The question's related to Azure and the support for Linux. Do you want to speak to the question was specifically, does Azure support Linux? And I'll throw that to you.
Yes, I encourage everybody out there to you can Google or Bing, I'd rather say, if you query Linux on Azure or Linux, like any combination of Azure and Linux, you'll quickly find that there's plenty of support for that OS on top of the Azure platform, and not just, support where we say, yeah, we've done it, but there's not much usage on the platform. Actually, more than 60% of the workloads that are operating in Azure right now are on Linux and not on a Microsoft operating system. So,
Interesting.
I would highly encourage folks to just do a quick query, and you can see all the different flavors of Linux VMs that you can get stood up on top of Azure. There's Red Hat support, there's Ubuntu support, there's a lot of different distros that you can play around with. And, feel free to tweet me or feel free to email me after the session if you got more specific questions. But absolutely, yeah.
Nice.
And then
So
a big deal on top of Azure.
that's awesome. Do you think that with stuff like .NET Core being able to run everywhere, which is awesome? I started out my career as a .NET developer, so that's super cool to me to be able to run code that, C# that I like to write everywhere. Is stuff like that kind of helping unify Azure to make it so much easier for developers to get their code running on any operating system? Is that the plan, to make it easier with containers and .NET Core, stuff like that?
Yeah, I'd say yes, for sure. If you look at kind of the Steve Ballmer days, the marketing from Microsoft, or the approach was like, sales team, go get the customers to swallow Microsoft, Microsoft, Microsoft. And these days, if you look at what Satya Nadella's been doing, the new CEO, kind of his messaging is more like open platforms, so big, dedication to open source. Let's seed our Office application and suites on top of iOS and make it a first-class citizen on Android. So you see a lot more openness than you've seen from the traditional Microsoft in the past. And if you look at, even some acquisition history, we bought Xamarin a little while ago, I think a year,
Yep.
year and a half ago, and that company basically would allow you to, write once and then deploy across multiple mobile operating systems, and we tie that into Visual Studio. So, yes, we're trying to, as best as we can, give developers the choice to develop on platforms that they're comfortable with and that they have a history and heritage with. And we know that developers run the world. They build the applications, and the consumers go there, and then the consumers bring their money along with it. So we kind of understand the way the world works there. And in order to do that, you've got to see the developers and give them stuff that makes them happy and gives them the opportunity to be as creative and be as awesome as they are. So definitely.
That's awesome. So this is kind of only loosely related, but it's something I'm really excited about, and that's HoloLens.
Mm-hmm.
So with HoloLens, I assume that, and I haven't got my developer kit yet, so I'm kind of chomping at the bit. I assume I'll be able to use all the same old tools. And do you know anything about the integration? As developers with all these new technologies like HoloLens, is Visual Studio going to be the one-stop shop to interact with both the APIs and the underlying platform if you want to have stuff hosted in Azure?
I'm actually not sure. I actually just received my developer edition of the HoloLens not too long ago. So I'm actually, sitting here looking at it in my office here, and I've
Nice.
just started to test drive some of the applications, but haven't started to do any development on it yet. So I put that in the parking lot, and if you give me a little while, I can follow up on that question. I do know a few people who are in the HoloLens group here in Mountain View. We do some of the
Nice.
hardware, so I could totally float that to them and get an answer in short order. So
That's cool. For anyone listening, if you haven't checked out HoloLens, you must. It's just remarkable technology, and I think it's going to change the way we do a lot of things. So check that out. Let's jump back. We've gotten into some interesting technical stuff. I want to go back to something a little less technical, and just the question is, how do people know which provider is right for them? So we've touched on that throughout the entire discussion thus far. what are the questions that you get posed when you're talking to these clients? I assume they're shopping around to the big three and looking at what offerings there are. You've talked about the security and the identity. What other questions are coming up from folks as they're considering their move to the cloud?
Yeah, sure thing. There's actually been an interesting kind of shift in most enterprises. Like if you think about the word DevOps, like that didn't really exist, 5, 6 years ago. So you had, classic software engineering, you had test engineering, and you had people who lived in the data centers, like the network guys, the server guys, the storage guys. And you're starting to see kind of a consolidation of folks who know how to, write code, folks who know how to interact with the CLI of, the actual hardware, folks that know how to do a combination of things, and you're seeing them land in DevOps. So I get questions about how do I get started from just like spinning up a trial instance of Azure and doing like a lift and shift type of operation where I want to take a small application and move it into a cluster of VMs in the cloud. For some of the security professionals who don't write code from day to day, but they're like all about compliance and risk management, I get questions about how Azure is compliant with a number of United States and just global certifications. So I get questions about ISO and SOC 1 and SOC 2 and PCI for credit card and HIPAA. I get questions about like literally disaster recovery scenarios for companies who want to cap their local infrastructure and kind of just make everything from this day forward backed up into the cloud. Like, how does that work? Things like RPO and RTO, like how much time is it going to take in the event of a disaster for these things to come back online, or for me to switch from primary to secondary and then back once the other data center is back up again. So that's what makes my job fun, because I never get the same question twice in a day. A lot of my customers are in different verticals, so they get to focus on different things, and they get to educate me sometimes on the things that matter to them most, and the compliances and audit specifications. So hopefully that long answer covered most of what you're talking about. But yeah, it all depends. I talk to software engineers; they have their set of questions. I talk to the infrastructure guys that have their set of questions, and then on the security side, I definitely have their set of questions, and it's a mixed bag mostly.
Yeah, I'd imagine it would be. So with the security stuff, let's talk about something like PCI or HIPAA. If some new app wants to come along that has personal information, healthcare information, where does it start? Encryption on disk, in transit, at rest, etc. So what kind of certifications does Microsoft have that support HIPAA, and what kind of limits are there for supporting something like that?
hmm So, like in the United States, we are HIPAA compliant, FedRAMP, NIST. Sarbanes-Oxley is right around the corner. CGIS is one of the ones that is also right around the corner. We have our own separate government cloud for, federal and Department of Defense type of workloads. So it's actually different data centers than the standard Azure cloud that we talk about with our customers day in and day out.
Gotcha.
I'd say that if your listeners could go to the Azure Trust Center. That's kind of the portal of all the information and documentation that we've put out there for folks to take a look at. But when it comes to security, there's nothing that's more paramount than that. And even as salespeople, we're like, okay, should we kind of lead the meeting talking about, more cloud or more security? And what I've found is that security is kind of like that, the global topic. So no matter where you are in an organization, if you're in finance, you kind of know and care about security. If you're in infrastructure, you care. If you're in HR, you care. So it's definitely a hot keyword right now, and it's something that everybody can get their mind around. And
Yep.
to your question, we've bought probably 4 or 5 different security companies over the last 3 or 4 years, and pretty excited to come out with Azure Information Protection. So to your point about keeping things encrypted and safe at rest and in motion, we actually have the capability now to, as you're writing in real time in your Office documents, PowerPoint, Excel, if you're dealing with PII or personally identifiable information, security, social security numbers, credit card numbers, what Azure Information Protection allows you to do is dynamically classify that. So if you were to be working on a spreadsheet, you want to save it to your local personal OneDrive, we allow administrators to put policies in place to flag that information and classify it. So at Microsoft, we have strictly confidential, we have confidential, we have like vendor approved, we have customer read, we have all these different like flags or policies, and then the documents that you're working on kind of get auto grouped into one of those classifications in order to do actions on them, like save it as a specific file name, save it to a specific location, send it out of the company to a vendor. You've got to either comply with the policies that have been set, or raise your hand for like a business justification. So a little pop-up will say, hey, you're going to sign and say that I want to forego this policy, and it'll go up to my manager who will sign off and then have that action approved. So we've kind of taken away the oops button from enterprises, and a lot of security professionals and IT groups are starting to thank us. So this is a really recent thing that we've come out with in the last couple of months, but it's definitely been a response to kind of security uneasiness and that hesitancy in IT and in other departments. So really excited that that's out now.
That's really cool. It's the first time I've heard about that, but I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, Azure Information Protection, and then the company that we bought that brought a lot of capability to that is called Secure Islands.
Cool. That sounds awesome. So we just got a question coming in about, it's kind of a shift in topic just a bit, to talking about big data and how Azure supports big data and what options exist there.
Mm-hmm. So we've got a number of things. We've got Azure Machine Learning, which will basically, you can train your cluster of computers to kind of learn on the fly about what you're wanting it to do. We've got really deep integrations with Hortonworks and Cloudera. Both of them have offerings on top of the Azure Marketplace, which is similar to the AWS Marketplace, where you can kind of buy apps and buy different VMs and kind of spin them up already pre-built and pre-configured to fit the environment. So, and then we've also got more white glove, like sales support for folks who kind of outlay large amounts of capital into the cloud. Like you can get an official, like dedicated Azure support person to kind of walk you through deploying that. So that's, we've got about as much support as AWS does for big data, and it's all based around what the customer is trying to do. So big data is such a broad term that you've got to usually like take the whole meeting to make sure that you know exactly what they're trying to get as an outcome, and then working together in partnership with them towards that.
Nice. Do you have any case studies that you know of for stuff like streaming, like massive amounts of streaming data, or anything along those lines?
So not that have come across my desk recently with my customers, but if you were to go to, there's a customer, if you search Azure customer case studies, there are a number of them that are there, and I'll make a note to myself to follow up with you and give you a few links for things around streaming, but there's a consolidation of customer and partner success stories. If you were to just search, actually, let me put the link in here in the actual meeting here for everybody. There we go.
So along the same lines as big data, another question just came in. The question is, what are the challenges that you see in pushing big data from on-premises to the public cloud? And I guess I'd like to expand on that, not just the challenges, what are also the perks? So pros and cons of taking your big data and moving it to Azure.
Okay. Just big data or like all?
You know, the question was specifically big data, though I think it's if we brought it down to a more general level and we could touch on big data, it might be much more useful to have the holistic view.
Yeah, so the reason, I mean, to start at 1,000-foot level, if you look at a company who, you know, is in South San Francisco and is focusing on trying to cure cancer, for example. So they've got, you know, lots of researchers, lots of, you know, chemistry PhDs that are trying to make drugs and do clinical trials that will kind of affect their outcome of curing some disease. Any company has kind of specialists that are focused around some area of subject matter expertise. Like if you're in financial services and you know a lot about, I don't know, stocks and trading and that kind of thing, but IT and like being able to spin up infrastructure and give that to the groups that need it, that's not like the specialty of most of the companies that are around in the world. So if you're Rackspace, it is, but you know they're only, you know, if you're Equinix, you know, probably that's one of your core competencies. But that's something that not many companies have. So when you look at hiring people, look at HR and look at how many folks you want to hire on to do infrastructure and manage that, a lot of the conversation is around, do I want to be in the business of procuring, maintaining, keeping up, patching, doing all this stuff to infrastructure and to software and to technology when that's not even my core business. So a lot of CFOs are telling their CIOs, like, hey, man, if you can get our footprint a lot lighter in terms of the amount of physical servers and the amount of data center cages that we're in, you could save the company real dollars, and we could focus on what we do best as a company, and we can kind of outsource the rest. So that's where the conversation usually starts. And then as it pertains to big data, it's the same thing. A lot of, you know, Cloudera, for example, has an on-prem instance where you buy a whole bunch of servers. You know, I came from Cisco, so you could like take a cluster of UCS servers, you know, a couple years back before I came to Microsoft, and just basically run the Cloudera software on top of it and configure it and tune it in a way that it's collecting and capturing and doing that big data function that you wanted. The same benefit exists for putting that function into the cloud if your company is of the mind that they don't want to continue to be responsible for, you know, servers and storage and networking on-prem. So most of it boils down to, I just want to get out of the business of managing and patching and configuring servers. If I can, you know, click to spin up one and then next finish in order to kind of stand up what I want, then I'll pay for that, and I will probably retool my staff so that they're doing that function of infrastructure management, but also maybe some other things that are beneficial for our organization. So I've seen like IT get transformed in some companies to kind of like an internal accelerator where in partnership with engineering, they will create, you know, little applications that will go on the Azure Marketplace or in the iOS App Store, and they'll try to become first in their industry to, you know, write a tool or write a thing that becomes a new revenue stream for that company or a new cash flow, so that IT is not seen only as a cost center, something that costs the business money, but also something that can generate revenue and generate some returns.
That's interesting. I like that. Um, so you, I think that you made a really good point that I hadn't really considered in that way before, but it's about focusing on core competencies. Um, so that allows companies to kind of decide that maybe we don't want to be patching servers all day and don't want to be paying people to do that, and they kind of offload it to something like Azure, AWS, or Google, etc. Um, what about the challenges? Do you hear people say, we'd love to get on board with Azure, we'd love to move all of our stuff to the cloud, but and what is that? What is that but that they follow it up with?
Yeah. So it could be a number of things. Um, Usually, a company is not going to rip out anything. They're going to try to integrate and migrate so that it's coexisting both on-prem and in the cloud for some amount of time. And what you need in order to be able to do that, most times in enterprises, is a clean AD environment. So your Active Directory and your users and groups need to be cleaned up. You need to know kind of what kind of access policies you want in place, who gets permission to access what resources. We need to replicate basically that structure from on-prem into the cloud and run that in a hybrid fashion. Um, Sometimes they don't have the staff to do it or the expertise. So, a lot of my job is to interface with, Microsoft ecosystem partners who actually have, the capability to translate what the customer requirement is to actually, the configuration and deployment and the maintenance and managed service, of that job. So sometimes it's I just don't have the people or the skills to do it. And other times, they want to do this try before I buy type of thing. So it's usually I want to dip my toe in. I don't want to jump off into the pool before I've proven it and tested it out. So I've got another team that is great at doing, proof of concepts, and even most of the partners in the ecosystem, have, week to one month long engagements where you can kind of handhold the customer, show their whole IT team and staff what the delta is between what they're doing today and what they could be doing in the future, and kind of highlight the simplifications, highlight the economies of scale, and like just how your team of IT professionals will be able to scale themselves out so much better and so much more when going to a hybrid or more cloud environment.
Awesome. A couple other questions filtering through. We haven't talked about this one specifically, so I wouldn't mind touching on this. It's does Azure work well with VMs, or I should say work best with VMs, containers, or are both kind of on equal footing at this point?
So I would say that so we came out with Hyper-V such a long time ago, and I haven't played with containers as much as maybe some other DevOps folks have. So I don't have as much of a, like, when you look at the characterization and the performance statistics, I venture to say that the VMs, since we've been doing it for such a long time, probably have been tuned and configured and have had, so many back and forth between customer and then engineering feature updates and revs and stuff that we probably have our stuff together. And that's true across Hyper-V, VMware, like all of the different hypervisor layers.
Yep.
But I'm happy to, again, go put that in my parking lot as well. If there's specific questions around, how we characterize on top of Docker and like how we integrate with Chef and Puppet and that kind of thing. I know each of those companies have offerings on top of the Azure Marketplace. So that's another cool thing about the marketplace is like we don't pretend that we know, container technology better than the folks that created it. So
Sure.
to partner with them to create an offering that sits on top of the Azure Marketplace it's kind of like the best of both worlds, and that makes it such that when you ask a question about performance, it's like, oh yeah, we had Docker like actually write the code with us or write it themselves and publish it to our platform, so that when they offer it to you, Mr. Customer, it's performing up to your expectations the same way that it would be, outside of, a vendor's cloud. So I know it's good just because it's there and it's been published, but in terms of how good versus, traditional VMs versus what they look like on top of the Azure Marketplace, I'm not sure about that yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's fair. It is it's quite the new technology, and it's popping up everywhere. So I imagine it'd be tough to keep track of how it runs in every environment. So we talked about platform as a service. Somebody's asking what platform as a service offerings are available and what their maturity level is overall on the Azure platform.
Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different ways to think about platform as a service. Like when I talked about Active Directory, kind of moving it from on-premise to Azure, one of the cool things that we did with that platform is it extended so that it pre-integrates with applications from a single sign-on and multi-factor authentication perspective. So, most workers, when they go into their job, there's a couple of different websites and a couple of different applications that they use from day to day. And if you could imagine, like if you got 10 apps, you have 10 sets of username and password requirements to get into each of those applications. One cool thing that we did with the, Azure Identity Platform to make it platform as a service was integrate over 2,700 different SaaS apps so that you could basically sign in once and then do single sign-on and then multi-factor authentication, either use your thumbprint on your iPhone or use an iris scanner or biometric strip on your laptop to be able to kind of do away with our fickle brains and forgetting usernames and passwords across all these different applications that we have to do for our work. So that's one example of, using the Active Directory identity platform and putting it into the cloud and offering functionality as a service to, end customers. I'd say another platform as a service kind of thing that we're doing is around just being able to write once and push out across multiple different mobile platforms. So we've integrated Xamarin into Azure such that you can connect your Visual Studio or Team Foundation server to an Azure instance and basically have all of your developers, pushing up and checking in and checking out code. And then once that's done in, C#, for example, you can translate that into, mobile application updates across Windows Phone, across iOS, across Android. So we're taking, the video platform tied in with Azure, the functionality of being able to push out, code quicker because we've only written it one time, not 3 times or 4 times across, the multiple, mobile application platforms that are out there. So those are a couple examples of like platform as a service and things that we're doing with the, big concept of an Azure cloud, but making it specific to, identity, making it specific to mobile. We've got a couple of examples of that with security as well. And you can do the typical, if you package, raw VM and storage space as an instance, and then you slap on the, server 2012 or server 2008 R2 or whatever you're comfortable, like that platform kind of goes without saying. That'll always be there, and you can continue to build applications on top of that as well. So we also think of that as platform as a service too.
Nice. Awesome. So we've talked about security quite a bit. It's a topic that I quite enjoy, and it sounds like one that you have to talk about quite a bit in the process of speaking with customers. One of the questions somebody just asked was, kind of a comparison of Azure's security for related to VPCs in the AWS world. So, what does Azure offer that's kind of similar to a VPC? And if you don't have specifics, that's all right.
Yeah. So when we talk about security, think of VPCs as more like redundancy and making sure that I don't lose data kind of construct. What we do is back up 3 times anything that's put into the cloud, and then replicate that across to another region. So they're literally 3 copies locally, and then another 3 copies in another region that are out there, so that data that you're saving up to the cloud, should a disaster happen in one region, is still replicated and stored somewhere else. There are a lot of different guidelines around how you should do high availability, how you should write applications. And this isn't even like in the cloud. This is just how you should do application development and building from a security perspective in terms of it's classic software engineering stuff. So I wouldn't classify it and say that it's in the cloud or it's anything that's a new concept. It's just how to do good quality application development, and it just happens to be on top of the Azure platform. But yeah, that's how we look at it. We want to make sure that all of our customers' data, again, is safe, which is why we have the compliances that I talked about earlier. But in terms of architecture of applications and making sure that you don't, if you forgot to control save something, like we have auto save as well. So if you're writing in Visual Studio and you leave a session open and you forgot to press save, no worries. We've got auto save that's available, so that if your session got wiped out, or if your computer crashed because you didn't have it plugged in or the battery died or something,
You're
still good to
describing me
go.
right now.
It's happened to the best of us, man. So I know how that goes. So hopefully that was an answer to that question.
Yeah, I think it was good. Let's see. On the same topic of security, just on the single sign-on, somebody asked how you feel about single sign-on making us more vulnerable to security breaches, because now basically one cracked password or one stolen password from a phishing attempt results in a breach of multiple services. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's why multi-factor authentication is so important. Like the stance of Microsoft is to assume that all passwords, no matter how long they are, no matter if they comply to your your standards or not, are able to be compromised. And the fact that it's a lot harder to steal somebody's thumbprint or to steal somebody's, you got to play John Travolta and Nicolas Cage like Swordfish in order to like take somebody's face off and like be them. So we're not there yet, and that's why we're assuming that anybody can do username and password. And moving on to that second thing is the safest that you can get for right now. So I agree with whoever posed that question, that if you just had one set of credentials and somebody hacked it, that would be horrible. But it's not the case that somebody from Ukraine or Russia or China can also find a way to take a stolen set of credentials and then pair that with something that's personally identifiable to you and that's going to be on your person, i.e. your face or your finger or some code that could be texted to your own cell phone. So that second factor, and then in the future, maybe even the third factor, are going to be really, really, really important to pair with the username and the password.
Nice. So it's the something you have, something you know paradigm.
Yes, definitely.
Nice. Let's see. Got a few questions that I have got buried around here. So we've talked about high availability in and outside of the cloud, and I think that I think that technology like the cloud, the big three have kind of helped us solve high availability. It's really trivial for an individual developer to create a highly available, highly scalable app. Um, so I think the cloud has helped us solve that. What's the other things that the cloud is going to either help us solve that we don't know it's going on, we don't know that it's coming, or it's there that we just don't think about?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that all of the big three are thinking about right now. And if you look at like Cortana on Windows 10 devices, or you look at like Alexa on the Amazon side, learning and having our machines kind of learn about what's going on around them and who we are, and then being able to provide insights will be life changing, I think. Think about how advertising is done right now. The best that they can do is kind of put stuff up to the right of your searches to make assumptions about, how likely you will be to click through to that thing and then buy it. But if you're using your compute power as a human being to do life, I think, as opposed to using a computer just to do your job, then we kind of have the ability to kind of have people have personalized experiences that their computers and their technology will be able to cater to and be able to offer them in the very near future. So that's why our machine learning algorithms are super important. That's why the intelligence is such a hot topic when you think about Internet of Things, like all these sensors that different companies are putting out. I mean, it's a lot of it is for learning the environment. Once they're completed that data gathering stage and they've got a big enough set, I think they'll be able to start to derive some insights and say, hey, it looks like you left your phone at home. We noticed that your car is starting and you're leaving without it. Like, you
Yeah.
probably won't want to drive away. Or, we noticed that. There'll be lots of different crazy things that computers will be able to give us as insights. Like, oh, you're double booked for your 12 o'clock meeting. Like, don't forget to decline one of them or send out a response to have one of your colleagues, fill in on that call. Like, very simple things that will be super helpful, but that the human brain just sometimes forgets about or just isn't that great at resolving in the present day.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the combination of something like Cortana with the HoloLens to have that like digital assistant with you that can, I mean, the camera's there, it's seeing what you're doing to be able to say like, yeah, you're making this recipe. Oh no, you already put in a cup of flour. Like, oh, yep, okay, I did. Just to have the intersection of the two, I think is going to be fascinating.
Yeah. Or something like, Brandon, it's your anniversary next week. Like, make sure you don't space on it and get your wife flowers and, like, give her all the stuff that she deserves. Remember that, buddy.
I'm hoping that didn't actually need to happen. You remembered?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We're recording this call, right? But definitely.
So you're still alive. Fair enough. Yeah, I'm excited for that sort of intersection. One of the questions just came in is regarding bringing your own database license to Azure. Thoughts on that?
Um, I know we offer both models. Pure SQL on Azure, which is part of something you can spin up using an existing Azure subscription. So you pay, a couple $1,000 and it's kind of like buffet style. But then there's also, we've enabled the functionality of bringing your own SQL licenses too. So that is available and supported. I don't know the specifics of it off the top of my head, but I know that customers can do either.
Nice. So we were talking kind of about machine learning, kind of, I mean, it's not quite AI, but the term is a fairly generic one. Somebody asked, it sounds like we're saying that AI will arrive prior to quantum computing for IoT things. What are your thoughts on that?
So I've heard a few definitions of quantum computing. I would ask for a little bit of clarification, but I think, yeah, AI will be the kind of second step that we see in applications after the data has been collected in this current phase that we're in right now. There's still a lot of sensors out there collecting. Um, in terms of quantum computing, would love to get a little bit of clarification about what he specifically is asking about, and happy to fill in the answer after I get the.
Yeah, I'll see if follow-up comes filtering in soon. Um, yeah, it's tough when we talk about AI because I think the AI that most of us are talking about is not some sort of sci-fi full humanoid model, and I think sometimes people kind of assume that. So um, I guess they're just saying quantum computing in the cloud. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how
Okay.
far off.
So any function, that we're doing on-prem now, you take, Big Blue from IBM, like stuff that takes a lot of daisy chaining of computers and parallel processing to kind of do and think about. Um, I referenced 52 data centers this year, like one a week. Um, so just know that it is our, aim to be able to take any function, whether it's remembering your own anniversary or whether it's like computing, um, the genome sequence at some point. You'll be able to do much of that in the cloud. So, yeah, whatever quantum computing workload or state that you're talking about, we're probably not there today, and it's probably pretty expensive today, but know that that's kind of where we're going. So, yeah.
Nice. Just see if any other questions from listeners are filtering in before I jump back to some of my own. Um, let's see. We've talked a lot about security. That was one of the ones on my list I wanted to cover. Here's another question. When you talk to, I hear this a lot. I hear stuff like the cloud is just somebody else's computer, and why would I want to give up ownership of that? Uh, to me, the benefits make sense because now I don't have to be worrying about what happens when the hardware fails. My virtual machine is still going to be there, and even if it has to get restarted, it's going to exist, right? If a catastrophe strikes the data center, I'll still be able to take my snapshot and start it up elsewhere very quickly. What are your
Hmm.
thoughts when people ask about why should they go to the basically they're giving up ownership of their hardware?
Yeah, I tell people that I got into computer science in school purely because I was curious about, the different things I needed to learn to build applications. And then when I started working as a computer programmer, um, banging out code and shipping products, um, it was okay to me. But the reason that I moved over to sales is because I like what the technology can do for people and for businesses in terms of like solving problems. So it wasn't the building of the thing that got me the most excited. It was kind of the application of that thing or the whole sentiment around that thing and how it could be used to solve something greater. So I would answer that question the same way. Like, I mean, yeah, you probably built that tower under your desk or configured the heck out of that laptop that you have right now. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's a bunch of compute, it's a bunch of storage, it's some networking. And the reason that you're checking in to work, the reason that you're coming in and doing what you're doing, hopefully is to kind of solve that that meta problem. So I don't get into many conversations like this, but I do think that folks who've been in IT for a long time or who just have a long heritage and history, with their hardware, it's a little bit harder to give up than maybe somebody who's in this generation where, they were kind of, my daughter was like born with a cell phone in her hand. Like she didn't have the appreciation for it or the respect for it that somebody in a previous generation would have. And the same is probably true for, laptops and power servers and things. So I guess some folks in this generation won't attribute so much to it and won't have such a problem giving it up just because they haven't been alive long enough to have that appreciation. But that's generally how the conversations go when I get that question.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good answer. So we have, let's see, one more question just popped up on my screen here. So it says, today with Azure, can I run desktop as a service? Presumably, I think they're talking about, can they use remote desktop to connect in and just run a Windows desktop?
Oh yeah, that's I've got a game server up, and the way that I manage it is to RDS into it, provide updates to it. It's on one of the back-end servers on my website. So yeah, you can totally do that, and that's how I use it for mine today.
Nice. Simple. I like it. We got 5 minutes left. Anything you want to talk about before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank everybody for listening. I'm not sure how many folks have got on the call, but I wanted to leave everybody with the thought that we're in an era of the new Microsoft. So I talked about kind of the Microsoft of old being a lot more closed and proprietary. I just like people to challenge themselves to embrace the new Microsoft. That's all about open source, about partnerships, about platforms that we're inviting everybody to. So we want to be, again, a first-class citizen on top of, all the different mobile platforms. You see Office Suite and Office 365, working with Macintosh computers, working with lots of different stuff. So, next time you think of Microsoft, just remember that it's not your grandmother's Microsoft. We're kind of in a new age here. And if you've got more questions as it pertains to Azure, feel free to tweet me. Feel free to look me up. I'm happy to answer questions and help evangelize and get the message out about all the good stuff that we're doing.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's still kind of early over on the West Coast. By this point, I probably wouldn't have had more than just one cup of coffee, but you seem really awake.
Well, you probably heard a little bit of baby crying in the first part of the call. My son is right outside. I've been awake since 6 o'clock and only had one cup so far. So I'll probably leave this call and grab another one before my 11 o'clock in 5 minutes. So, but yeah, Thank you. I appreciate the time, Ben, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, and I hope we get to talk again. Thank you.
Yeah, same thing. Take care, guys.
Thanks, everyone. This will be recorded. Diego, who is also kind of skulking in the shadows, is on this. He's making sure it's recorded, and he'll get it posted. Just checking with him now to see, probably within the next couple of days. So if you want to rewatch or send it to a friend, feel free to check out the /webinars link. If you want to learn more about Azure, in particular, if you want to learn about certifications, we have a new learning path for developing Microsoft Azure solutions, and it's a learning path. Now, it's going to be a really good one. It's about 13-ish hours, and it goes through actually building stuff for Azure. And so I think this is worthwhile for any of the developers on the webinar. And I think that about wraps it up. Thanks, everyone, for watching. This was a lot of fun for me. I hope it was fun for you. Hopefully it was useful, and I look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thanks, everyone.